Hello everybody, we did the reveals for the Traveling Travel Agency mini set. Of course now I have to do a star rating. A quick little abstract of this star rating. In case you're not aware, firstly, how I do the star ratings. I normally give a card 5 stars if I think it's going to go into a tier 1 deck, 4 for tier 2, 3 for tier 3. 2 stars is normally if I think something's going to be a bit of a techie card, or it'll see some play and maybe doesn't work, or I think it's going to go into like a tier 4 deck that just won't work. And then finally 1 star for a card that I just don't think will see any play, full stop. To continue my abstract of this mini set, and to, reveal a little bit of the stuff behind the curtains, I think this is the weakest mini set they've ever printed. I've given none of the cards 5 stars for this mini set, which I've never done for any other, rating before. Now, also worth noting to go with this before, you get your pitchforks out at the Hearthstone dev team. It's really hard for the mini set to impact the meta, because realistically every class only gets 3 cards. Is 3 cards enough to push a new archetype? Not normally. So you're really looking at pre-existing archetypes and whether or not the new cards can push them up a little bit further. Now, I will say there are some exceptions sort of to this rule. When dual class cards are printed in the mini set, it kind of gives every class access to 5 cards instead, which is actually really nice. And you may be, thinking right now, and you're thinking correctly, the tourist mechanic is kind of like giving a class a dual class option, but it's actually a bit more than that because you get access to all of the cards from this set for that class. Which gets me to the point that I think it was really unfair that 2 of the classes got an additional tourist to the other ones, and unsurprisingly, I think those 2 tourists are going to impact the meta the most out of all of the cards that are being printed. I know it was, hard to potentially put tourists for every class, as it would have made this set have a lot more legendaries than any other set, but I think it was just a little bit unfair. I think either none of them should have got another one, or everyone should have got one. I don't think Mage and Shaman should have got one. That's my preamble, anyway. Let's get off first with actually one of the tourist cards. We'll get off with Mage with Portamancer Skylar. They got Huddle Up, they got Burn Down. I really like Skylar. Obviously, the intention of this card is to go into big Spell Mage. Probably Huddle Up is meant to go into that package as well. Unfortunately for Huddle Up, I think it is a little bit too weak. I keep looking for like this 5th card of the big spells that you would put into big Spell Mage, which I think would make it really hum. Huddle Up might see some play in testing into that deck, but filling your board with a bunch of, on average, 3/3s, I think it's just simply too easy to clear for other decks. For 7 mana, it's just too expensive. Getting back to Skylar as well, Skylar can do some disgusting things. You can potentially discount your Huddle Up to 0 mana on turn 5. More realistically, you will want to hit a big Tsunami instead. That is going to be disgusting. That is going to win you games. However, big Spell Mage right now isn't really up there in the ratings. And do I think adding Skylar and that disgusting potential turn for, swapping a coin with a Tsunami on turn 5, do I think that is enough to push the deck up much more in the rankings? I'm actually not convinced it is. So I've actually given Skylar 3 stars. I think Big Spell Mage will sit somewhere around the tier 3 deck. Maybe it pushes it into the low end of tier 2 and it should be a 4-star card, but I've decided to be a bit more conservative. I think it's more likely to sit in tier 3, despite that potential disgusting outcome. Huddle Up I've only given 2 stars to. I think it'll see some testing in Big Spell Mage before being dropped. Simply put, you don't want to use your coin to discount Huddle Up to 0 cost. It is so much better on the Tsunami. Like, the Tsunami is so hard to clear up afterwards. The Huddle Up is actually pretty easy to clear up for a lot of decks around, turns 5 and 6. Finally, Burn Down, which I've not talked about yet. 3 mana draw 3 cards is obviously really strong. Them being on 5 for 3 turns is not too bad as long as your curve is fairly low. You're probably going to be able to play those cards. Despite this, though, I've only given it 1 star because I don't actually think it's going to get into any of the current existing Mage archetypes. I think they all have better draw options, or at least more better draw options for the deck they exist in. Like, for example, the Minuless Mage deck has their draw 3 cards, discounting them by 3. Sith Mage has the one that you discount for every spell skill, which also works with, not Linessa, the other one, Ryla. It also works with Ryla to trigger her effect, so I just don't know if Burn Down gets to that deck. Also, you don't really want to have a combo deck where you light your combo piece on fire, because that's really bad news bears, so I just don't quite see it for Burn Down. We'll go into Rogue next, since the Mage is tourist into Rogue. We have Sharp Shipment, Agency Espionage, and Robocaller. I think Sharp Shipment is actually better than people are giving it credit for. That being said, I still think it's only going to be a 2-star card. If this was a 3-mana card, I'm 100% certain it would see some play. There are a few decks out there that use weapons in Rogue, and I definitely think you would put this into that deck to give you, you know, it's not quite just like an additive damage. I think that's what people forget about weapons. It's not like a minion buff. It's actually multiplicative because you get to attack with the weapon over multiple turns. So for example, you know, if you had a 2-2 weapon, the potential damage on the weapon is 4 damage, right? If you give it a 4-4 stat line, it's going to do 16 damage. Sure, it's over 4 turns, but it's still a lot of damage, right, for just this +2/+2 buff. So potentially this weapon is better, or this buff for the weapon is better than I'm even giving it credit for at 4 mana. But I'm just not quite convinced that you can take enough time off to take this and play it. There is a weapon rogue deck out there currently that is like slowly seeing a little bit more play with the like the Burgle package on the lifesteal weapon. Maybe this sees play in that deck, I'm not sure. I also mentioned that maybe Cosmic Keyboard deck might exist with the Sharp Shipment, but I think it's just too narrow and niche for you to be playing your Sharp Shipment and your Swarthy Sword Shiners to keep your keyboards up. What if you don't draw the keyboards? There are ways to tutor for that, of course. I will probably try to make this deck work, but all in all, I just don't think it's going to quite work as a package, so some testing, but 2 stars. Maybe surprisingly, I've also given Agency Espionage 2 stars, mainly because I think it'll be used as a tech card in some decks. It's probably going to be more on the 1-star side of things. I've been a bit generous giving it 2, to be honest with you, but any deck that says, like, shuffle stuff into your deck, like the Bomb Warrior, which isn't particularly strong right now, or Plague Death Knight, this is actually a pretty nice tech card to fill your deck with other stuff to dilute out all of the nasties in your deck. I'm not sure Mage with the Rogue Taurus would necessarily put this in as a tech card, but, you know, maybe. Maybe there is a world where you get all your big spell value out there, and you just need maybe one other push of value. You put an ETC in that deck, and you're probably going to put ETC in your big spell mage deck, and you just put Agency Espionages in one of the options. I see the world where that happens. I also see a potential world maybe where you try to do some sort of value Paladin deck who also can Taurus into Rogue. Maybe you put Agency Espionage as an ETC in that deck. I'm not 100% certain on it. It's probably more likely going to be a 1-star, but I gave it the benefit of the doubt. Robocaller I've given 3 stars to. I actually quite like this card. It's potentially 3 mana, 3/2, draw 3. I think more realistically, it's probably going to draw you 2 cards for the most part, which is still really good, so I've given it 3 stars. I think the most likely place this is actually going to see some play is... It might even see play in, like, Earthen Paladin. Like, that deck really would like a refill. They have got a deck, I think the Jiminator was playing it quite extensively, where you Taurus into Rogue to abuse their cards, where you like recast cards from not the Rogue class, to give you bigger and bigger Earthens. I think one of the issues with that deck is actually drawing through the deck to get all the stuff out of it. And Robocaller would be pretty nice for that. It's also potentially going to see some play in Big Spell Mage, where obviously you would like to draw big cards out of your deck. Well, sometimes you'd like to draw big cards out of your deck. More importantly, if you have Skylar's the only 5-drop in your deck, you could wait for Robocaller to draw a 5 cost and hit the Skylar to pull it out of your deck. For that reason, I think it'll go into at least Big Spell Mage, which I think is going to be a tier 3 deck, hence the 3 stars. I was tempted to actually bump this a bit further, because there's maybe a few other archetypes. In fact, Rogue could also potentially use this to draw some of their 8 mana spells, both of which you can discount down to lower mana costs. So if you pull out an 8-drop spell, which actually costs 0, it's normally pretty good, right? Now we go to Paladin Land. They have Vacation Planning, Busybot, Trustfall. I think the intention was that Vacation Planning and Busybot would go together as a package. The only real great way for Paladin right now to get 1-attack minions on the board is to use Silver Hand stuff, but there's not really a great Silver Hand package there to really abuse the whole thing together. That being said though, I think because of the fact Vacation Planning swarms the board with some minions and has a refill on it, I actually think it might see some play in Flood Paladin, so I've actually given this 4 stars preemptively. If it doesn't get into Flood Paladin, if it turns out he's too weak for that list, this is actually probably going to be a 1-star card, but there is a world, they do use the one where it gives you a 1/3 weapon and 3 Silver Hands for 3 mana in that deck. Maybe you drop one of them to give you a bit of extra draw to get through your deck faster, to get you maybe your Sea Giants and that type of thing. You might be able to tell where I'm going here. I don't think Busybot will actually see play in that deck, because there's not enough Silver Hand cards in there, nor are there enough other 1-attack minions. So I actually think Busybot is going to be 1-star, and I don't think this is a bad card, by the way. I'm hoping this is giving us like a nod that in the future we're going to get some sort of silver hand or one attack minion package for Paladin. So I think this is the preemptive, like, first part of the butterfly flapping its wings, right? And the hurricane is going to happen, like, 1 year down the line with a really strong one-attack minion deck in Paladin. So for now, I'm giving it 1 star, but watch out for this one in the future. I actually think the card is pretty good, just not enough support around it. Finally, Trustfall, I've also given 1 star to. I undernado this card. I think it's really hard to evaluate it. The way I've evaluated it is the best deck in Paladin right now is Handbuff Paladin, and this isn't a minion, so it won't see play in that deck. Also, if I was thinking about Flood Paladin probably doesn't run this card either because they want to flood the field with stuff. And then you look at what other Paladins exist out there. There's Earthen Paladin, and actually Earthen Paladin is trying to play their Earthens around turn 4, so I don't think it makes that list. And when, you know, you put everything together, I think the only deck that might run this is Highlander Paladin. And I don't think that is going to be good enough. Mage can also tourist into Paladin. Do I think Mage is going to run this card? Probably not as well, so it's just a value-generating card with archetypes that aren't going to be able to support it right now. I don't think it's actually bad. I think it's actually pretty decent for a Discover card, but 1 star. Okay, now we get to Warlock lands. Do I have to talk about the Warlock cards? I've given all of these 1 star. I think they're all pretty bad. Weirdly, I've seen some people on the internet really rating Deadline. I'm so confident this is going to be a bad card. Just because the most likely outcome of Deadline is going to be you draw the card, you won't have the mana to play it or to trade it back into your deck, or you really don't want to spend the mana because you want to, you know, do something proactive, which basically means you skip your draw for that turn, and that's a really bad thing to do. My other hot take on Deadline, I'm not sure if this card didn't have Temporary on it, if it would actually see any play. I'm not convinced that 2 mana Destroy a minion would see play in Hearthstone right now. I'm being a little bit tongue-in-cheek over that, but Obliterate doesn't see play, and the take 3 damage requirement is not that hefty on the card. If you had no other text on it, you're just a 2 mana Destroyer guy, would that see play in current Standard? I'm not convinced it would. Fine Print, also 1 star. It is a catch-up card in a deck that should never be catching up. There's just no reason to have it. And I think more often than not, you're going to TK your own face when you want to use it. So, yeah, 1 star. And Employee of the Month is just pack filler. Giving a minion lifesteal in Warlock, sure, it's nice, but it's still not a fast-acting effect on the keywords. You could run this in your Rogue deck as well, because Rogue can tourist into there. Rogue likes lifesteal. Do I think they're desperate for lifesteal so much that they put this in the deck? No, I think it's just too bad a card. Now we get to Death Knight land. They have Eternal Layover, Travel Security, and Soul Searching. Clearly, Eternal Layover and Travel Security is intended for some sort of Death Rattle package, which, funnily enough, Warlock can tourist into Death Knight and has its own little Death Rattle package, which isn't seeing any play right now. Do I think Dead Air combined with Bad Quality, bundled together at 4 mana, the cost of, you know, those 2 cards together, is good enough to see play? No, 1 star. I think this card is horrible. I think Death Knight would just never ever use this card unless I'm missing something. Warlock might be desperate if you want to make their Death Rattle package work, because they don't have many great ways just to trigger them other than their Tourist. So I think if this is going to see play, it's going to see play on the Warlock side of things that Tourist into Death Knight. But I just think the card is too weak. Also, if your opponent has any Death Rattles, it's a really, really, like, bad situation to trigger their Death Rattles for them. And when I think about it, it's like, what do you do with a bunch of 1 health minions in Warlock right now? There's not a lot of great stuff you can do with that. It's not like the Quality Consecration combo. There are, like, little things you can do like that, but most of them are overkill versus what you could just do with, like, the AoE card alone. So I think this is just 1 star. Travel Security, I've actually given 2 stars to. I think this will see some testing. What you see here is a security card. What I see here is a big egg. And the problem with it being a big egg is that it just takes too long to come up. Most of the aggro decks will be set up at that point and will be smoking you. Sure, this is a pretty big stumbling block for them because it's a big taunt minion. I say big taunt minion. It's a taunt minion that summons a big minion from it. But they might be able to just, you know, break through the wall and then just ignore the 8-drop for the rest of the game. I just simply think Death Knight has better Death Rattle options to abuse, and in fact I think the Rubian Egg might even be better than the Travel Security just because it comes up so much earlier, so you can get that value faster, which makes it harder for your opponent to deal with that value. Regardless, it is a Death Rattle card that summons big stuff. Yodeler is in that class, so they will test it. It'll be a 2-star card. Soul Searching I've given 3 stars to, which is basically the rating of what I think play Death Knight will do, because I think this is the only deck that will run that card. It's going to be really nice for soul searching to pull out your Resker, potentially pull out your Titan as well from your deck. It fits very nicely within the niche of Plague Death Knight because they run currently double Unholy Single Frost. And also, if you hit Resker with it, which is in that deck, there's a pretty good chance that your Resker is going to be 0 cost, because Resker is almost always 0 cost, even at the start of the game it feels like. Even before minions died, I think Resker is actually at 0 cost. I think it's a bug. The thing I would say about this card as well is, the list for Plague Death Knight is pretty refined at this point. It's pretty tight as well. There are some cards you could remove from there, but often you'd be removing things that generated corpses for you, which is going to potentially make it harder to spend the 5 corpses in that deck. But actually, I came to the conclusion that Death Knight might even just run 2 mana Discover card from your deck without getting the copy of it, just to increase your chance of getting Resker. I do also think one of the weaknesses of this card, and maybe why it doesn't see play, is that it's a card, not a minion. That being said, as I said, it's a tight list, which implies that all the cards have got pretty good value in that deck. So I think most of the cards you can hit with Soul Searching are pretty good, whether it be anything that adds more plagues to your opponent's deck, or something that generates you some more value down the line. So I think it'll get into that list. I think it's a tier 3 deck still, so I'm keeping it as a 3-star card. Then we get to the other Taurus. This is Turbulus in Shaman Land. They also get Ice Crown Brochure and Hydration Totem. I think Turbulus is coming at just the most appropriate time for Shaman. I have seen Shaman slowly rising up the rankings on the win percentages. There is a deck that is just, like, starting to get some popularity, which has a lot of battle cries in it. It's kind of mid-rangey, a big value smorgasbord of a deck. And I think Turbulus will just slot straight into that deck. Currently, I think it's hovering around the tier 2 range, so I've actually given Turbulus 4 stars. I think it's a really fun card. I know people meme as well that Hunter has no good cards. There are a few cards from Hunter's... my god, I'm losing my mind. Hunter's Perils in Paradise set that I think that Shaman would like to steal. Especially some of the things that, you know, give buffs or discover cards from your deck. They'd probably be willing to run that in the deck. And in fact, they've also got some big things in like Sasquatch that maybe, again, you don't want to put in your big Battlecry deck. I certainly think this is going to be one of the other 2 new archetypes, so to speak. I know Big Spellmage wasn't a new thing, but I think it's going to get a huge push. I think this Battlecry Shaman deck, which is going to be like maybe a bit more mid-rangey, is also going to get a huge shove with the Hunter Taurus side of things. So I'm really excited to see what decks people put together with this. I think this is actually probably the most exciting card of the set. Ice Crown Brochure, I've actually surprisingly given 3 stars to. I actually was kind of a little bit cold on this when I saw the reveal. But having played over the last few days a little bit of Highlander Shaman, I actually would put this in my Highlander Shaman deck. That sits around like a high tier 4, low tier 3 deck. There's probably other decks that would run this in Shaman, or at least put it in as a one-of. It's a very nice way to early deal with minions, and potentially deal with more than one minion. Freezing them for a later date is also not the worst thing to do for Shaman, when they have a lot of big removals as you go into the game. So I actually think this will see some testing. It'll probably only get into a tier 3 deck though, so I'm going to give it 3 stars. Finally, Hydration Totem, I don't think it's a bad card, but I'm giving it 1 star. I just don't think an archetype exists for this card just yet. The problem is, like, the most aggressive, like, swarmy type for Shaman right now is the Evolve package, and you don't really want to buff your minions when you're going to evolve them anyway. You just don't get any value from the buffs. That deck normally runs minions that are cheap and summon more minions on top of it, so I just don't think Hydration Totem will sneak into that list. Just trying to remember now off the top of my head, who goes into Shaman? Oh, it's Death Knight. Death Knight goes into Shaman. Maybe Death Knight could make some sort of swarmy deck with the Hydration Totem. But Unholy, Triple Unholy Death Knight isn't really a big thing right now. If it does become a thing, Hydration Totem might be like a consideration for it. Though the problem with that is Buttons isn't particularly an aggressive card, which you would have to run to get your Shaman cards, and you're probably going to be running more minions for your aggression deck rather than spells, and Buttons wants to draw you spells, so it's a bit anti-synergistic, so I just don't see it all working together. But again, this is one to watch out for the future. If there's any more Totem support, or if there's any like Zoo-like support for Shaman, Hydration Totem probably would actually see some play. Alright, again, like Warlock, I don't want to talk about the Hunter cards. They're all 1 star. They're all pretty bad. Monkey Business and Workhorse, clearly designed for some sort of tokeny deck. I think Monkey Business is sort of anti-synergistic with the deck it's supposed to exist in, which is part of the reason why I want to give it 1 star. You want minions on board to give them bananas, but to give them bananas on the board you need a full hand, which is, you know, that's the dilemma, right? Hunter does have some ways to fill their hand with crap. Do I think they have enough ways to fill their hands with enough crap that you can get enough bananas on the board rather than bananas into the hand. No, and actually bananas in the hand are pretty weak, I think, for Hunter right now. Workhorse is a solid card, but it's just a bit too fragile, I think. And then Cash Cow just shouldn't be a Hunter card. I don't know why this is a Hunter. It's basically a vanilla card. Then we have Warrior, Alloy Advisor, Reserve Spot, and Punch card. Alloy Advisor I've given 2 stars to. I think this could see some play in some sort of control deck, possibly Odin Warrior, for example. There are ways to, you know, enrage this card to give you big chunks of armor which you could OTK with, but I think there are actually better ways just to get a ton of armor in Odin Warrior regardless, though you wouldn't run the Alloy Advisor. The other thing I think it might get teched into, maybe Highlander Warrior might run it. They don't necessarily want to run some battle cries in the deck that give them bad value, so to speak. You want them to get good value, like have really big board effects, for example. Hence the, you know, the TNT shuffling mechanic. This hasn't got a battle cry on it, so it doesn't generate you more value in that deck, and it will help you get to the late game, because if 2 minions trade into this, it's 4 mana, 2/6 taunt, gain 6 armor. That is okay. It's probably too fair, which is why I've given it 2 stars. I think you'll see some testing, and then just drop off altogether. Reserve Spot, I think is going to go into Bungar Warrior, which I don't think will be a thing, so it's 1 star. Giving a random minion in your hand +4/+4 for 3 mana, I think is too fair. You really want to hit the discount, but hitting the discount means you have to bastardize your deck so much that it reduces your chance of winning the game. Hence, 1 star. Punch card I've actually given 3 stars to. I went off a bit on this card on the reveals, because I really wish there was a bit more intrigue in this card, like a bit more of a combo potential on the card. And really there isn't a lot of good combo potential on this card in Warrior. That being said, it is still 3 mana, potentially deal 9 damage. Bellowing Flames has been seen play in the control decks for Warrior. This is pretty close to that card. It's actually better in a situation where boards get full of like 3/3s rather than, you know, like a board that has a big minion and then some small minions around it. Funnily enough, a lot of decks right now do run these, like, well, I say a lot of them. A few of the decks that are at tier 1 right now do have these decks that swarm 3/3s, namely the Insanity Warlock deck, and Punch card would be a really good way of, you know, bam! Hit 3 of those imps at the same time. So, because of those reasons, I could see this seeing some play, especially in Highlander Warrior, which I think is hovering around the tier 3 region, so 3 stars. Number Cruncher, Handle with Bear, and Ungoro Brochure are the Druid entries for this mini set. I've given all of them 1 star. I think Druid right now has got too many good packages that none of these cards will displace those packages. I think they're generally okay. I think Ungoro's Brochure is fine. I think Number Cruncher is fine. I actually think Handle with Bear is actually a pretty weak card, but I just don't think any of them are better than the pre-existing like dragon packages that you can just plug and play into your Druid deck at will. So I think none of them will see play, hence all 1 star. Finally, for the class cards, we get to Demon Hunter. I'm actually going to combine this with Priest, because I think some of the cards from Demon Hunter are only going to see play with the Priest cards as well. Before I get to those cards, though, we'll deal with Spirit Peddle, which I think will actually see very little play. I've given it 2 stars. I don't think the deck exists yet. I actually had to look through what Window Shopper Demon Hunter was doing right now, because in theory it's a pretty good card for like a Window Shopper like effect. But obviously that deck is pretty aggressive, so you're probably not going to get your big discount. Which means you kind of want to run a big Demon Hunter deck, or just at least a big deck, full stop. And Demon Hunter doesn't really have that. The best they have is Highlander Demon Hunter, and that is a really, really poor deck right now. I do like the card. I think the set isn't there yet for it, but in the future, Spirit Peddle I think could see some play, as long as they get some good big Demon Hunter support, or big Demon Hunter support full stop. And then we get to the cards I think their intention was to go into this Pain package. Certainly on the Demon Hunter pre-side of things. This is Demonic Deal, Infernal Stapler, and they would probably consider running Job Shadow and Envoy of Prosperity into that deck. One of the things I think is a bit of a weakness for the Pain package with Demon Hunter is they haven't got a lot of good ways to stabilize. Like, if you imagine Pain Warlock, they eventually play Infernal, and, you know, maybe get like 12 health, get 13 health back. More importantly, it just takes them off like Death's Door. Demon Hunter doesn't really have that. They actually have a lot of good lifesteal cards right now, so I think Demonic Deal is meant to go into that package. That being said, I think it's a little bit too weak of a card. 2 mana deal 4 lifesteal damage. On paper is good, but I think actually in general for that deck, which is probably going to be more aggressive than the average deck, putting a big demon on top of your deck is going to be more disruptive than it's worth. So I'm actually only going to give this 1 star. I don't think it will make that list. If it is going to work, though, it's because of Infernal Stapler, which I'm actually giving 3 stars to, as well as Job Shadower and Envoy of Prosperity. I see a world where this Demon Hunter Priest Pain deck sits in the tier 3 region. Infernal Stapler is very good at hitting the... It's called Sauna Regular. I can't quite remember what the card's called, but the one that requires every time you take damage, it discounts it by 1. This is 2 procs on that if you hit a minion, and maybe that gets that up a turn sooner, which means that you get more value early, which means it's harder to deal with. Job Shadower, I think, is also a great card with the Stapler. If you can get the Stapler up a turn before the Job Shadower, especially if you can cheat it out by like using a coin, for example, it'd be so nice to swing with the Infernal Stapler, get the Job Shadower effect to proc off, and you go to 3 mana 8/6. That's a really good stat line. I ummed-and-ahed a little bit on the Envoy of Prosperity. I don't think this will see play in Pain Priest. I think it has to see play in a Demon Hunter deck, because it will probably need extensive refilling. And Demon Hunter is very good at drawing cards and filling your hand with stuff. So I think if it doesn't see play in this aggro Pain deck from Demon Hunter, it probably sees no play, full stop. That being said, there may also be another deck that spawns from this, where rather than having this Pain package in the deck, you actually just run it as a more Zoo package, and just have, like, Arana in there as, you know, I play all the cards in my deck, and then I fatigue, and Arana tries to kill them off with the fatigue damage instead. Maybe that can work, so I've kind of, like, tried to cover my back a little bit, and I've given this 3 stars. By the way, Job Shadow also might see play in just Pain Priest package without the Demon Hunter stuff. I nearly bumped it a little bit further, but I still think that package is going to be a tier 3 deck, so I kept it in the 3-star range, but this is probably the one of the 3 cards that I think is most likely to see some play. Finally, Silvermoon Brochure. I actually don't know really what you'd want in this, to like put this in deck. Why would put this in deck is the question, right? The Silvermoon side of it is a buff. The other side of it, which is the Shadow side of it, is like a more control card. It seems like it would be better in like a mid-range deck. It doesn't really exist right now, so I've only given it 1 star. I don't think you put it in your Pain package either, because you don't really want to give your cards that take damage, give your face damage immune, because then you don't get the face damage effect. So it's kind of anti-synergistic with that package. I just don't see it. I think it's just too fair. That's all the class cards. Now we'll get to the neutral cards. We have Travel Master Dungar, Dream Planner Zephyrus, Clumsy Steward, Busy Peon, and Carnivorous Cubicle. This might surprise some people, or maybe it doesn't. I'm giving Dungar, Zephyrus, and Busy Peon all 1 star. I think Dungar isn't a good enough effect to make your deck basically only have like 5 other minions in it, or there or thereabouts. Somewhere between 3 and 5 other minions in your deck. It's just too big a requirement. It takes too long to come up because it's this 9 mana minion. You'll die before then. I just don't see it working. So the deck I think it probably has the most chance to see some play in is Priest. That has a lot of Resurrect cards, a lot of control cards. And even then, I think there are better options for Priest. The one that might surprise people is Zephyrus. I've seen some people rating this card pretty highly. It's just not old Zephyrus though. It makes a big difference between a card being perfect or potentially perfect. I kind of see this as Discover a better than average card, or Discover 2 better than average cards. Snake Eyes didn't see any play at Discover 3 cards. And I would potentially Discover 3 cards. More often than not, it's 2 cards, sometimes 3 cards. And I just don't see Zephyrus seeing play in that. I just don't think there's this clamour for discovering cards from a small pool that might help you. I might be wrong. Maybe you do want the spell damage from this. Maybe Rogue tries to... Sorry, not spell damage. The spells that damage the face. Maybe Rogue tries to use it to smoke someone down. Maybe this does see plays like the 30th card in decks, but I certainly don't think this is a card that you would like start building your deck around. And I think there's a realistic chance that you get not quite the potentially perfect card that you require, and it becomes a dead card in your deck and you're just not able to play it. So I think for those reasons, I don't think Zephyrus will see as much play as people think. Peon as well, I've seen some people really highly rating Peon. I just don't see it. I know, like, discounting cards is, you know, good, but you normally want it on a battle cry, not a death rattle. You can just play around it too well. Also, I don't think there's a lot of locations in the game that getting a 2-mana discount on the location is actually significantly good. There are a few, but I don't see it. I think there are better cards to run than Busy Peon on turn 2. And then my other issue is that you would want it to smoothly curve into the location discounted. There are no 5-cost locations, so Busy Peon I just don't think will work. Clumsy Steward, I'm actually giving 2 stars to, but it's the most generous 2 stars I've ever given. Realistically, this is a 1-star card as well. I think some control decks might tech this in if ever there was a situation where a combo deck rose to the forefront, like a true OTK combo deck. just to try and disrupt that combo piece. He plays Clumsy Steward, hope to discard a combo piece, or at least make them use a combo piece out of sequence, and then maybe you win the game from there, where otherwise you couldn't beat the combo deck. For that reason alone, I actually gave it an additional star, but I don't think in the current meta there really exists that type of deck, so I think for the most part you wouldn't actually choose this from your ETC, and I think you'd be putting this in your ETC, by the way. So it's probably more realistic a 1 star, but there's so many other cards got 1 star, I decided to push it to 2. Similarly, Carnivorous Cubicle, I've given it 2 stars, and it actually got a star rating because it's a green cube. I think if this wasn't a green cube, it wouldn't see any play. But because so many people have fond memories of Carnivorous Cube, people will try and make this card work, but I think it's significantly weaker than the old Carnivorous Cube, and I just don't think there's any deck right now that can abuse it particularly well compared to the old Cube deck. Anyway, that is all the star ratings for the mini set. Let me know if you think I've got any particularly wrong. I imagine a lot of people have some issues with Zephyrus. Sure, shout at me in the comments about Zephyrus. And then tomorrow I will be trying to put together some new decks. And when I say new decks, it's going to be realistically more like old decks, but decks that have more of the new cards in them. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time. Bye.